to start our tour of Idaho at Celebration Park, which is south of Boise, Idaho. I'm not sure why my voice sounds like this today. But anyway, this is the Snake River Valley right here. And the reason I'm here is basically these rocks. How did they get here and why are they that shape? That's the biggest question. To understand that, you kind of have to know a little bit of history of how things were formed around here. Millions of years ago, this area was down near the equator, and it was in a shallow sea, so the rock type was cretaceous. In other words, made up of fossilized shells and animal fish bones, that type of thing, made into limestone. Through the years, though, volcanic activity in this area has taken over mostly. So these red rocks are all basalt, which is a fluid type of magma or lava. Now, the reason these rocks are here is 20,000 years ago, there was a Lake Bonneville. Lake Bonneville is where the Great Salt Lake is, except it's a lot larger, or was a lot larger. The thing about this whole area out here in the west, or a large part of it in Utah, Nevada, parts of Idaho and California, it's called the Great Basin. And what that means is there's no outgoing rivers or streams. Every stream that flows into the Great Basin, which is a huge area, all that water evaporates. That never makes it to the sea. So everything was good. There was a balance between evaporation and water coming in until there was a volcanic eruption which plugged up the Bear River and made it flow south. The Bear River used to flow up more north and join the Snake River, then go down to the Columbia. However, that lava flow forced the water to head south into Lake Bonneville. And because the river was so large, it caused that lake to fill to its brim. It was like 1,000 feet deep and about the size of Lake Michigan. So a big lake. Now the problem was when it got filled, the pressure of the water behind it wasn't a dam. It was made up of just natural gravels. And those gravels, once they got crested, the pressure of the water made an ever bigger and bigger gap in that weak spot. And all of that Lake Michigan, I think it was 1,100 square miles of water, rushed down the Snake River Valley. And the cliffs over here to the side, were all scoured. And these big boulders, even though they're this big, the water was so strong, it pushed these rocks along the bottom and they banged into each other, and that's why they're rounded. Normally you wouldn't expect them. These are like river pebbles. However, acted like river pebbles, except they're so large, but due to the huge amount of water. Now, the reason that these are here, the reason they were dropped, was upstream there's a narrow constriction, and where the constriction was caused the water to flow like 70 miles an hour, so really fast. Once it got into here, this valley, it spread out and the water speed dropped. Because it didn't have the energy, it then dropped the boulders. Now, the more downstream you go, the smaller the boulders are, because they could be carried farther. So that's pretty much a starting point of this little tour. I'll try to add to it with the things that I forgot. You can see the lichen on there, and also you can see the vesicles, which are these air bubbles. Like I said, basalt is a real watery type of lava. It's like Hawaii's lava. There's two types of lava. There's at least two main ones. Rhyolite, which is the thicker one, which is has a lot of silica in it, and then basalt, which has a lot of mafic rocks. So look at that one up there. Hard to believe that rock could be tumbled and moved by water. Okay, that is Guffey Bridge. It was built in the 1890s to carry ore from downriver here. They had silver, I think tin ore. However, by the time they got it completed, the mines were pretty much petered out. So it was still useful for the ranchers to bring their supplies and to bring the cattle across the bridge. So it wasn't a total waste. So let's go over the bridge. Get a little better perspective. That's my white Malibu up there. Fishing. But again, this is south. ridge. That's all basalt. Black basalt. Another thing you'll notice that gives clues that there was a lot of water flowing in this area was the angle of the rocks. Like that rock straight ahead of us. See how it slopes from upstream to downstream? And that's caused by that rock settling to the surface, but the smaller rocks kept bouncing along the bottom and hitting into the rock, and the front part got polished this way, and then down water not so much. You can also see the vesicles on that rock too. Man, my voice is not good. Something else pretty amazing about this area is the agriculture. Pretty much we're in the desert right here. However, underneath the land, there's one of the biggest aquifers in the western United States. All this basalt, again on the cliffs over there, you can see it. Anyway, when it cools, it cracks. So it makes a lot of pores. So it has high porosity and permeability, which means how easy water can flow through it. So the volcanic land is rich, but without water, no deal. But all these farms out here have all these irrigation systems, and they pump it up. You can see water squirting everywhere. So you see pretty much desert plants, except on farmers' land where the corn and the potatoes and everything else grows due to the abundance of water. Pretty cool. Okay, I'm in a section of the park that's supposed to have petroglyphs. I haven't come across any yet, but this kind of shows what the deal is. This is a normal shade of the rock, and this dark reddish brown is like a magnesium coating. They're not totally sure how it's formed. Some people think there's an algae or lichen involved, but it's mainly like magnesium oxides that come and coat the rock. So it's not very thick. You can see it's just a real thin layer. And because of that, what the Native Americans used to do would be take a hard rock and pick that outer layer off and make a indentation to the whiter inner rock and make their drawings. So that kind of shows the three stages. That's pretty much freshly broken. That's kind of partly weathered, but this is really the desert patina or desert varnish that the art is done on. It's another pretty good example of the desert varnish. You can see this wedge broke out, and there's the piece that broke out. That's the normal shade of the rock, and the almost black is that desert varnish. You can also see on this rock the scour marks from was polished by the river flowing by. Lots of vesicles in that. So there's a lot of gases that were still built up in that basalt. That's typically the layer that's near the surface. It has more vesicles or bubbles. Okay, up there you can see the columnar basalt. Since it's real liquid, obviously it forms a horizontal layer, and the cracks occur perpendicular to the cooling. So of course they cool from the top down and the bottom up. And then you can see how they fracture and fall off. That's called a talus slope. And that's why this area has such a good aquifer, in that all that talus gets buried over time, and then it can collect water, and water drains through it real easy too. We're gonna visit a spring later on that they say the water takes 200 years, and the time that it falls out of the sky till it comes out of the ground. Pretty cool. Okay. Kind of a cute story how these boulders got their name. They're called melon boulders. There was a farmer I think he was back in the 20s, put a sign up that said, "Free melons. Take one home to your mother-in-law." Obviously, all these boulders in your field aren't the best for growing crops, so he was trying to get rid of them. I don't know how much it worked, but that's how they got their name. Melon boulders. Here's a pretty good example of what the freeze-thaw cycle does. They get a good bit of snow around here, so the moisture, ice, water gets in these cracks, and then as it freezes, it expands and cracks it a little more, and then the plants get in, the roots expand, they crack it a little bit more. Eventually, it breaks it down into soil. A couple days later. Whoops, that's video. The starfish?
That's what we call it.
Okay.
Now, what's interesting too is there's only one petroglyph here that we're pretty firm as to what it means. Yeah, you see how the man jumps out?
Yeah.
But when we were standing over on the other side, he doesn't.
A petroglyph differs from a petrograph in that a petroglyph is created by pecking off the desert varnish with a harder rock, whereas a petrograph is a painting on the rock. The relative age of the glyph can be determined by the brightness of the remaining glyph where it was pecked off. Brighter glyphs are the younger glyphs.
They said this is 1,700 years old. Right? I don't buy it.
Okay.
Right? And the reason is so during the 1860s, when gold and silver, when people were coming from both east and west to come to the Idaho Territory, and they're going after precious metals, the last thing they were doing is feeding themselves. All right, the red shirts, the miners, whatever you want to call it, they were digging in dirt. They weren't farming. They could only hunt for so much food. They could only trade with so much with the Indians. And this is not even good soil to farm in, but it'd be great for livestock, if you could get some sort of farm or ranch going. Right. And a gentleman by the name of Connor Shea, all right, came out here from Scotland, and he saw this whole arrangement, and he said, I'm not going to dig in the dirt. And I remember it's like there's a phrase you occasionally hear, it's mind the miner, right? Mind the miner, that's where the money is, okay? And he set up shop over there across in the Hawaii County. You see that little farm that's growing alfalfa?
The bright green?
Yep, that's one of the first ranches in Idaho, okay? That's Conchee Basin, Connor Shea, okay? So in the 1860s, so I've been told, and I believe it, okay? Now you can imagine Paiute and Shoshone fishing along the river, going up and down the river, doing their thing. In the 1860s, he went to Texas, and allegedly, the first load, railroad cars full of livestock that he brought were sheep. Okay, so that's true. He's got some domestic sheep over there. Makes sense, all right? You're a Paiute or a Shoshone, you're fishing, and for the first time in your life, you see something new, all right? You see a new animal. You're going to post that on Facebook, all right?
Right.
This is Facebook. So you can imagine somebody on this side looking over towards Conchee Basin where they had seen this thing up close. Look, Mom, Pa, I saw something new. I will put money that this is an image of a domestic sheep. This is representing all its little woolly wool, head, tail, legs. Now, on social media, what happens when you post something? The older stuff goes to the bottom. Look at this. Here's a hook.
Oh, there's the hook.
And a dot. Look what they did. They actually felt this was so important that they were willing to overwrite something older. Right?
Yeah.
I don't believe this is 1,700 years old. I believe that this is a mere 160 years old. Now, oftentimes you go, well, where's the sheep? What happened to them? Look, they ate every single one. After that, all the livestock he brought out after the first load were cattle. All right, but you can imagine is like if he's got an ewe and a ram, and it's like, I'm not going to breed them. I mean, they're paying top dollar for food. Okay, he's making more money just having the animals slaughtered instead of establishing a ranch. He's not some cattle baron from Texas that's trying to build the herd up and then do a big drive to Abilene or something like that for the market. This is hot and heavy market. This is like toilet paper in COVID.
Okay.
All right. There is no such thing as, hold on to it for a rainy day. You make bank. And that's what they did, because not far up into the mountains there, the Oahe Mountains, on the other side of that caldera you see there, that was Silver City and Flint and Dewey and Delamar. I mean, they're pulling out gold out of the Blackjack Mountain, Blackjack Mine, Florida Mountain, the War Eagle Mountain. I was just up there actually this weekend.
Okay, more petroglyphs. This rock has a depiction of a human. It's called an andropomorph. I believe that's the name. That's a pictograph that depicts a human. Some of these, they think, are like 14,000 years old.